Is it true that every time someone self-builds a block, a kitten dies? So if anyone ever asks you that question, the answer is always yes, of course. And so we're going to use our kitten here throughout this talk. And our kitten's name is Stevie, because that's a cute name. And Stevie likes stability. And Stevie's kind of like kryptonite is volatility. So we're going to talk about how self-built or altruistic blocks introduce unnecessary volatility in the base fee. And I'll make the case that it's not great today and might be getting worse. And this may be something we got to worry about moving forward. Okay? And I'll give a little evidence of why this is such a controversial take. But we at Blocknative, so I'm Matt, I'm founder and CEO of Blocknative, and we really are focused on all things gas because we think it matters to everyone. It's one of these core signals that everybody is affected by. It doesn't matter who you are, if you're a gas producer like an L1 or L2, or you are a gas consumer, that basically, gas is kind of central to everything that we do, but it's the sort of thing that people don't really spend a lot of intellectual cycles on, nor do they really understand how it works. And it turns out by really understanding how it works, the inner mechanics of it, and sort of the block supply cycle, it turns out there's some unexpected negative externalities or interactions between different phenomena on the chain that's introducing instability into the base fee. So gas matters to everyone all the time, and there's little Stevie at the bottom. It's this highly levered metric. It's an interesting question. We've all seen this graph from high school physics, hopefully. Like, where is gas? Where is Stevie? Right there, right? And the issue here is basically all ARB on the network, the spreads which reflect any asset price, are a direct function of the precision of the gas signal. As the gas signal gets less precise, as there's more scatter in it, there is more scatter in every price of every asset across the venue. So getting really precise price signal turns out to be quite important for the efficiency of the network. Now, ultimately, gas is sort of simple on one level, but people generally don't think about it this way, that there's spot demand for block space, and that sets the spot price, and that's gas, right? Spot price of the underlying commodity of block space. And it turns out that it's kind of gnarly. It's multi-dimensional. On Ethereum, it's gnarly. Multi-dimensional, volatile, there's all these emergent behaviors. It's an interesting contrast. I always say the simplest gas marketplace is actually Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin really doesn't have any complexity. There's like one dimension. There's all public transactions. Everybody can see them. And there's not much debate in the Bitcoin ecosystem about what the current price of block space is. But as soon as you move to something as complex as Ethereum, things get a lot more dicey, a lot more volatile, and there's a lot more emergent behavior. And so in many ways, what's happening is all of Web3 is basically propped up on the shoulders of these gas markets, which is really code for Stevie, okay? And so Stevie wants things to be stable. Now, what I'm going to share with you is sort of a new discovery. We literally made it last week. And I'm making this analogy here. It's like as you have new instruments of observation, so this is an old telescope, and this is a much newer telescope. It allows you to see new stuff, right? So on the left is a early view of Jupiter and its moons. Before you had telescopes, you couldn't really see Jupiter's moons very well with the naked eye. Then you could. And of course, with more telescopes, you can see much further, much deeper, much more detail. And look, there's Stevie. But much more important is you can create new theories that explain the new phenomena that you see. And what happened was, in preparation for ETHCC, we made an upgrade to our platform, Transaction Explorer, as part of our EtherNow offering, that really sort of centered in on the gas markets. So this is a publicly accessible tool. You can get to it at ethernow.xyz. And it used to look like it does over here on the right. Now it looks like it does over here on the left. And we thought it was pretty cool, and we started to play with our new observability capability into the gas markets, and we noticed something unexpected, okay? So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. There's this assumption that you can build blocks on Ethereum today one of two ways. You can outsource block production to the MEV Boost network. I think most of you are familiar with that, but you have a specialized set of actors who basically build blocks on your behalf. They have MEV in them. They're more valuable. Or you can build what's known as an altruistic block, a self-built block. And you avoid the MEV and all those games, and you build it locally. And there's many voices that say this is better for the network. It's better for users. And don't play these dirty MEV games. And so here we have Stevie, who cares about stability. And the question is, which is the right way to go? And don't take my word for it. This is a talk that was given as part of ETHCC main stage this year by Marius van der Weyden, who's a member of the Geth team, that says, don't let your friends do MEV. And his whole talk was, don't run MEV boost. It's bad for the network. Okay? Now, Marius is a super smart guy. You can see his talk. Afterwards, I was like, hey, dude, there may be some factors to consider here, because it turns out that viewed through the perspective of base fee volatility, that the happy case and the sad case for Stevie's stability is switched, that the MEV boost block is the happy block and the altruistic block is the unhappy block, i.e. altruistic self-built blocks increase unnecessary volatility in the base fee, which adversely affects every participant in the ecosystem and changes all the spreads. Okay? So let's walk through this. This is the finding. And so we recently published data, this is not exclusive to us by any means, that the number of transactions that are transmitted privately, so they don't go through the public mempool, they go instead to OFAs and to public builders, or to private builders, I should say, has recently increased. It was percolating along at like 10 to 12%, and now it's like 30%. So 30% of all on-chain transactions don't go through the public mempool. And it turns out there's a bunch of reasons why, but bottom line is, in order for users to avoid being exposed to MEV, there's more and more private venues, more and more ways for them to transmit privately, more and more ways for trading bots to transmit privately, and this has become a pretty significant, or very significant, source of transaction flow. Now, the way that mempools work is they're continuous flow systems. At any given millisecond, there are transactions coming in. And then every 12 seconds, there's a new block that gets produced. So you have pressure that builds up in the mempool, and then a new block comes in, and the top of the mempool gets cut off, right? It gets sort of put into a block, and the mempool dips back down, the pressure drops, and it then builds back up, right? Now, sometimes there's something called a miss slot, which is a block doesn't created, and the pressure continues to build. So the next slot after that has double the mempool pressure. Except now, under this regime, there's two forms of significant mempool pressure. There's private pressure and there's public pressure. So now you have two different things, each of which are exerting pressure, but these don't get treated separately, or don't get treated the same way when it comes to block building. So this is this tool that we have. One of the things that you can do with Transaction Explorer is you can look at the public-private split of a block. So you can look at a block and you can say how many private transactions did it include, how many public, and what was the ordering of that. And we notice something strange, which is one of these, which are blocks that contain 0% private transactions. And it turns out they're pretty common, and I'll talk about that in a second, but we were sort of scratching our heads a little bit over why would a block be 0% private when it's 30% of demand? We realized these are almost certainly altruistic self-built blocks. Because if you're building locally, you're not going through the MEV boost external block building network, there's no way you have access to private flow. And so it turns out, we believe, this is a signature of an altruistic self-built block, 0% private. And you can observe them flying by right now, pull up ethernow.xyz, and you can see this. But we started to realize, like, wait a sec, if there's 30% mempool pressure for any given slot that doesn't get relieved here, then in the next slot, we should see a spike in percent private. And actually, we should see some effects on gas, and we should see some alteration of the base fee. And it turns out that's exactly what happens, okay? And so I'm going to walk you through two sets of data now. The first set of data is a set of slots. So we're at slot on the far right over there, 205, 206, 207, 208, 209, 210, and 207 is the one that has no private transactions in it. In our parlance, that's a self-built or altruistic block. So you can see the blue here, in this case, is the percent private, and it's like between 25 and 30%, but here it goes to 0, and here it spikes to like 55. And so we can see, because there's no private transactions in this slot, they then double into the next slot. Okay, so just what you would expect. And if we look at the amount of gas used, so how full was the block, we've had a bunch of conversations here about how 1559 targets 50% full blocks. What winds up happening is the networks are humming along at about 50%, but we hit this private, self-built block, and the gas utilization drops because 30% of the demand is missing, and then it gets moved to the next block, and poof, it shoots back up. This block is 100% full. And so if you know how 1559 mechanic works, this will drive a decline in the base fee, and this will drive an increase in the base fee. And that's, of course, exactly what we see. So, here we go. This is the unhappy path, right? So same data, now we're looking at percent change. So the purple here is the percent change in gas used, right? Typically, the percent change gas used is relatively small, but these self-built altruistic blocks dip down and then up, and it drives this pattern in the base fee. So this is the actual base fee across these 5 slots, right? This is this unnecessary volatility in the base fee, okay? And our belief is this means that the base fee doesn't necessarily accurately reflect demand. Because what the base fee is supposed to be doing is saying this is what demand is for block space right now. And so, oh, look, if I'm watching the base fee, demand has dropped and then demand has risen. And that's not at all what's going on. What's going on is someone self-built the block and it introduces this volatility. And what's interesting about 1559, the way the mechanic works, it's actually easier for the base fee to go up than it is to go down. And so what actually happens is it doesn't come down smoothly, it sort of decays over a series of blocks, and this is sort of interesting. So now we're going to zoom out a little bit. Same data, or same idea, but instead of looking at a few slots, we're going to look at a week. So each one of the columns here is a day, and this first view, the blue is MEV boost blocks, and the yellowy orange, I'll call it orange here, are these altruistic self-built blocks. And the question is, how common are they? And it turns out they're pretty common. They're anywhere from 7.5% to 9.5% of the network, give or take. So about 1 in every 11 blocks is an altruistic self-built block. So these are not unusual by any means. The next thing is, do they really consume less gas? So here, same split. Blue is MEV boost. Orange is self-built, and without any question, it's like night and day. You can just pick these things out. That self-built blocks are significantly less full. They're using less of the network, available network capacity. Now, then what we have and what we define, and we'll be publishing research on this next week, is a notion that we call a recovery block. So the recovery block is the block that immediately follows the self-built block, that spike block. And so here we further split things out. We identify the recovery block, in this case it's orange, versus a non-recovery block but still through MEV boost. And we can see that these recovery blocks consume significantly more gas on average than a regular MEV boost block. And the blue here is the self-built, and they're the smallest yet. So hey, by the way, if you're like a heavy consumer of gas, if you're doing transactions regularly, right now what you should do is before you transact, you should check the last block and see if it was self-built. Because if it was, you know the base fee is about to drop. And if you can't get into the next block, you should wait, because the block after that, the base fee is going to go up. And so this is one of those weird little nuances that everybody is going to need to respond to in their transaction flow, because it will affect the gas price that you pay and therefore affect profitability of a whole bunch of different things. So it's a relatively complex phenomena, but it is it's quite definitive. And if you care about gas efficiency, which of course you should, you need to incorporate this into your operations. Now, this is a little deeper into the weeds, but we did some research into the timing games that are happening here. So this is a dot chart of the timestamp of transactions included in a block. And the yellow is the self-built block. And what you'll notice is there's a lot more blue dots, and they cover a lot more time, and there's a lot more green dots, right? And so the blue dots are the prior block, the green dots are the next block, and the yellow or orange dots here are the self-built block. And so it turns out that because there's timing games that are being played at the slot boundary by builders, that basically the builders have 12 seconds to build a block, and the altruistic self-built blocks are more like 8 to 10 seconds. So it's a double effect. They don't have access to the private transactions, and they have less time of looking at the public mempool, so there's less value that can accrue. And so again, this seems to be a factor which drives down the value of these altruistic self-built blocks. And then what do we have in terms of base fee volatility? The key of this chart is the green, which is most non-recovery MEV boost block, a typical MEV boost block, doesn't move the base fee very much. Very low volatility in the base fee. But those blocks that are either self-built produce volatility to the downside, and the recovery blocks that follow produce volatility to the upside. And if you look at the scale of this, it's pretty significant. It's like between 12 and 15%. And so, hey, that's a pretty big swing for something which is supposed to accurately reflect and track basically spot demand for underlying block space. And I think just sort of, I don't have a slide on this, but that's at 30% private mempool. What happens at 40%, 45, or 50% is that this phenomena may not be resolved in a single recovery slot, because now you're going to have 100% private pressure. And what that means is the recovery block will need to last 2 blocks. And that has 2 effects. Is one, the volatility will go up because you'll have 2 artificially full blocks. And then 2, you'll have less time for the recovery, the decay to happen. And so one could foresee a scenario where the base fee basically becomes truly unstable. Should private transaction flow exceed more than 50% of the network, which at current course and speed it seems likely to do. Now, I'm not trying to raise the alarm bells here, but I am trying to get attention on this to say I think we need to pay attention here, because an unstable base fee would result in a basically not usable blockchain. Not great. Okay? And so what can we do? Like, I think first off, I would encourage everyone to monitor, observe this. Like, one, look at the data, keep us honest. We're providing the tooling to do so. Pay attention to these ratios, because I think everybody should be paying attention to it. 2, I think one of the things that could help us is if the venues that have private demand start to share signals. So that's something we're trying to do, is work with these various venues to make sure that people have better access to what's going on in demand. But that ultimately, probably what's going to need to happen is we're going to need to encourage fewer altruistic blocks on the network to reduce this unnecessary volatility. Maybe try to encourage folks to not have private flow, which again, both of these are socially difficult because there's a lot of social pressure for altruistic blocks, and there's a lot of pressure to say private flow is better because it protects you from MEV. So these are very unaligned positions. Okay? And then finally, today, the way 1559 works is it's asymmetrical in terms of fees going up versus fees going down, and we may need to make some rapid changes to the 1559 schedule so that the decay can happen faster. And Max talked a little bit about some of the changes there. So anyways, that's kind of our view, we help you out here, of like, hey, if this kitten is stability in the base fee, every time someone builds an altruistic block, kitten's not happy. Network's not happy, users aren't happy, protocols aren't happy, prices aren't happy, nobody's happy. And so this is, we think, a really critical issue. It's kind of a low-level issue, but one that we think will be playing out over the course of the next few months, maybe longer, and hopefully we can all get in front of. And anyways, that's my session. Happy to talk, happy to see spicy takes on this. Is this real? Are we overreacting to it? Should we not really care about it? Let's discuss. Thank you.